Good morning. This is the Subcommittee on Europe, Eurasia, and Emerging Threats, and we are now in session. And I would first and foremost like to ask my colleagues to, with unanimous consent, that Mr. Blumenauer, who has spent such considerable time and effort on this issue of water and the importance of it in world affairs today and in the standard of living of our people, that he be permitted to participate on the same status as any other member of the committee. Hearing no objections, so ordered. And it is the Chair's intention to have a short opening statement. The ranking member will have an opening statement, and I will give also time to Mr. Blumenauer as well as our other members for short opening statements. So good morning. The subcommittee has convened, and we welcome our witnesses today as part of our emerging threats, which is that's within the title in our portfolio. We examine the topic of water as a strategic resource and its potential use as a threat. Those of us who have lived around water our whole lives may be unaware of how water may be manipulated maliciously for both material gain and for political coercion. Although in our country's history, I think it's very clear that there were water wars and people in conflict and people and great accomplishments of people working together. That's our country's history is filled with that, focusing on the issue of water. Our witnesses today make clear such conduct is routine when it comes to countries like Communist China. That routine conduct is manipulation of water for a power's sake. As our witness today, Gordon Chang, will explain that China's illegal occupation of Tibet puts it in control of the roof of the world, and thus the headwaters that service half the world's population. We could be confident that resulting water disputes could be handled responsibly and reasonably, perhaps solved in international forums or in agreements like many other countries do. If, that is, we could be confident in that if China were a country that wasn't the world's worst human rights abuser, that has had no political reform whatsoever in these last 20 years when we've seen such incredible reform in other and former communist countries. Our Congressional Research Service testimony makes clear that most of these matters in terms of water are resolved through negotiations and peaceably, and I might say remarkably, these issues are solved by people acting responsibly and providing leadership and reaching out to people and to find solutions. Some of the 300 agreements over the last 70 years have unfolded in that way. Today, a warning alarm is sounding about China's control of such water resources, because we have seen that China, even in the last few months, is not so reasonable when it's making its territorial claims. China isn't the only flashpoint for the water issue, however, and water controversies are nothing new. Water is a volatile issue in the Middle East today, for example, but let's take a look. If you read the history, water played a very significant role in, for example, creating the environment that led to the Six-Day War back in 1967. Basically, that conflict began when the Syrian government decided to dam up waters that were flowing into Israel, followed by an Israeli air attack, which destroyed those dams. Then Egypt and other Arab neighbors were called into the conflict, and it almost led to a superpower confrontation, which would have been a disaster for the whole planet. And that all began with what? A water controversy over how much water was going to be flowing into Israel, and the attempt by Syria to dam up that water. Today, there are heartening signs, however, of cooperation in that same region between otherwise adversarial parties. The Red Sea to Dead Sea Canal project is one that has potential of supplying water to Jordan, a country suffering from extreme water scarcity. Last month, Israel, Jordan, and the Palestinian Authority signed an agreement setting the path for a Red to Dead Canal that would allow a desalinization plant in Aqaba, Jordan. Israel agreed to increase its fresh water that it sends to Jordan from the Sea of Galilee, and the Palestinians will be able to buy cheaper water from Israel. It seems like a very good deal all the way around, but let me note it took a long time and a lot of serious negotiations and a lot of sincerity on both sides, all three sides of that negotiating table, to reach that agreement. And let me just note, one of the first assignments, many people know that I was a speechwriter for President Reagan, and my first assignment was to welcome and to work with the President on his welcoming remarks for President Hussein, King Hussein of Jordan. And King Hussein of Jordan was the first visit to the Reagan White House, the first official visit. And I was supposed to work with the President on welcoming remarks, and that was the first remarks that I have ever written for a President of the United States, I might add, or anybody else. And the State Department sent me over a stack of things to look at like that, and their sample of what they would want the President to say, which I, of course, discarded immediately, and studied, but I studied everything that was in front of me, and there was one piece of paper in that big stack of papers of things to look at that jumped out at me, and it was that there were negotiations going on about the Red Sea to Dead Sea project that had just started at that time, which was 1981. And so I looked at this and I said, you know, this is really a significant thing, that we have people who are politically so separated, who are willing to sit down at a table because of how important water is and work together to try to find a solution. Perhaps we can use this as an example of the type of cooperation we should encourage. And so I decided I was going to write that into the President's speech myself. And I had no idea that was hired on, when I was hired on as a speechwriter, that I would have this type of personal contact with the President of the United States. And it finally dawned on me when they said, well, sure, if you got a good idea, put it in there and we'll see what the President says. And of course, he liked it very much, and it was part of his welcoming remarks. But at that point, I really found out I had a pretty good job after all. Well, we could take a look at what's happened, however. It has taken all of these years to come to an agreement. And I will say this, we should all encourage this process between Jordan, the Palestinians, and the Israelis, because that might take long, but it is symbolic, as Ronald Reagan noted in his welcoming remarks to King Hussein. It is very symbolic of what can be accomplished by people, even when they have other disagreements of how they can work together. The situation involving the basin countries in the Nile River, for example, deserves watching. And we need to look at this very closely, because the Nile, of course, flows through 10 different countries, and Egypt is one of the final ones. And basically, Egypt views the Nile as its primary national security and economic lifeline. So with so many countries upstream, that's an area we've got to look at and try to work with these powers to make sure that they are, again, are efforts made for cooperation rather than confrontation. This subcommittee held a hearing on July of last year on the dam controversy between Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, and that was a controversy that is now at the high-level international conference of water cooperation, which opened up in August. The Uzbeks are arguing that the proposed Rogan Dam in Tajikistan would cost them some $600 million a year. Since this issue has not been resolved, we will continue to monitor it closely, but that shows you again how significant just an idea of how we're going to control the flow of water can be. $600 million to Uzbekistan means that I would imagine it has more, whether their kids are going to get educated, whether they're going to have a proper health care system in that country is being challenged by the fact that water is being controlled. One positive story deals with our border relations with Mexico. The United States and Mexico in 1944 signed a water treaty that has allowed us to resolve most of our border water issues relative to the Rio Grande and Colorado River. And let me note for the record that I have been from California. I have studied not studied as much as some of our witnesses have, I'm sure, the history of water between California and the other border states and Mexico. And I think we have played pretty hardball with the Mexicans on this. And I think there have been very legitimate complaints on the part of Mexico in the past that the United States was not operating with them with the same type of sincerity and the same type of respect that we should have been doing to a country that is our neighbor that we wanted to maintain a peaceful relationship with. And the 1944 agreement has gone a long way to try to clear up some of those problems that were around for a long time, and we still have some issues of water that we need to work out with Mexico. Water is a significant issue and a potential geopolitical threat to much of the world. Our witnesses are in a distinguished group of witnesses today. Jeremy Sharp is a specialist in Middle East affairs with the Congressional Research Service. Gordon Chang is an author and a lawyer who lived in China for many years and has traveled regularly there since. David Goodtree at the Symposium for Water and Innovation from Massachusetts is certainly our guest of our ranking member, but we're looking forward to his testimony. And like most Americans, I have a great admiration for our witnesses' father. And Maura Moynihan's dad was, of course, Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, and who my generation of Americans looked up to tremendously. And he sometimes gave the Reagan White House a few fits, and I remember those as well. But he was always respected, his opinions was always respected, and he had a major influence on political thinking in the United States. And he was, of course, in my way of thinking, he was a heroic champion of human rights at the United Nations, and as well as our ambassador to India. And Ms. Moynihan, of course, was with him in India and has done a great deal of work on her own in terms of the issue of Tibet and China, and we're very happy to have her today to share her understanding of maybe the threat that we face with China still occupying Tibet after 60 years. So I would, again, with unanimous consent, I put the rest of the insert into the record a bio of all of our witnesses. So ordered without hearing an objection. And I turn to Mr. Keating for his opening statement.